press room was packed, flashing cameras, microphones, and the usual noise before a UFC weigh-in. At the center sat the newest sensation in mixed martial arts, a 27-year-old undefeated fighter brimming with arrogance. He had the title, the money, and the ego to match. When a reporter asked, "Who do you look up to in martial arts history?" the fighter smirked, leaned back and replied, "Look up to? Please. Those old guys couldn't last one round with me. Even Chuck Norris would be on the floor in seconds. I'd knock him out, Grandpa style." The crowd fell silent. Some laughed nervously, others gasped. The comment wasn't just disrespect. It was a direct jab at one of the most respected names in martial arts history. Chuck Norris, the man who trained with legends, inspired generations, and built his legacy on discipline and respect, had just been mocked by a loudmouth half his age. The reporters exchanged glances. They knew this line would explode online. Within minutes, clips of the fighter's words began circulating. "I'll knock you out, Grandpa," echoing across Twitter, YouTube, and sports blogs. Backstage, even other fighters whispered, "Did he really say that about Chuck Norris?" Some shook their heads. Others said, "He's finished. You don't disrespect a legend like that." But the arrogant fighter only smiled. He thrived on attention, good or bad. To him, controversy meant fame, and fame meant followers. He didn't care who he offended. As he left the stage, a journalist shouted, "What if Chuck responds to you?" The fighter stopped, turned to the cameras, and grinned. "Then tell him I'll give him the first punch. Let's see if he can still lift his hands." The audience booed, but the fighter just raised his arms, soaking it in like fuel. He had no idea that those words, spoken in arrogance and pride, were about to set off one of the most unforgettable lessons of his life. The next morning, the fighter woke up to what he loved most: chaos. His phone was blowing up, notifications flooding in faster than he could read. Clips of his grandpa comment were everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, even sports news outlets, all replaying that one moment. Chuck Norris? I'd knock him out in seconds. The video had gone viral overnight, and just like that, the arrogant champion had become the internet's most talked about fighter, not for his skills, but for his arrogance. At first, he laughed. He scrolled through memes and comments mocking him, and instead of feeling shame, he fed off the attention. He posted on Instagram, "No disrespect, just facts. The old days are over. I'm the new era." The post exploded with comments, thousands within minutes. But as he scrolled deeper, the tone shifted. Fans weren't cheering for him. They were furious. "How dare you talk about Chuck like that? Show some respect, kid. That man trained champions before you were born. Legends never die, but arrogance always does." Even older UFC fighters, men who had once idolized him, started posting subtle jabs. "Some lessons can't be taught in the ring. You don't call out a man who built the martial arts you profit from." The backlash was massive, but instead of cooling down, the young fighter doubled down. He uploaded a short video the next day, wearing sunglasses and smirking into the camera. "Hey, Chuck Norris, if you're watching this, nothing personal, old man. But if you want to test those ancient skills, I'll give you one free shot. After that, it's lights out." He ended the clip with a wink and a flex. It wasn't confidence anymore. It was arrogance on full display, and once again, the internet exploded. Clips of him mocking Chuck spread like wildfire, edited with dramatic music, side-by-side comparisons of his highlight reels versus Chuck's legendary fight scenes. But one thing stood out. Despite all the noise, Chuck Norris stayed completely silent. No interviews, no responses, not even a single post. And that silence, that calm, only made people respect him more, because everyone knew Chuck didn't need to talk. He let time and discipline speak for him. Meanwhile, sports networks started replaying old clips of Chuck Norris, his lightning-fast kicks, his sparring sessions with Bruce Lee, his military discipline, his decades of charity work. Younger audiences, who barely knew him, began realizing why he was a legend. And somewhere in Texas, away from the noise, Chuck was quietly training, not for a fight, but for balance, focus, and form. His life wasn't about proving anything anymore, but soon he'd get a chance to remind the world that respect never ages. As days passed, The tension online became a storm. Fans started demanding, "Chuck, answer him. Just one response, sir. Humble this guy. Show the new generation how it's done." Memes turned into petitions. Petitions turned into hashtags. Fight for respect, Chuck vs. champion. And finally, after a full week of silence, something unexpected appeared online. A short video, less than 10 seconds long, posted from Chuck Norris's verified account. He was standing in a simple training gym, wooden floor, punching bag behind him. He looked straight into the camera and said only this: "Respect is earned, not demanded. If you want to learn that lesson, I'll see you in the ring, for charity." Then he smiled, bowed, and walked away. The internet exploded. Every major news outlet picked it up. Chuck Norris had just challenged the arrogant UFC champion. The fighter's reaction? He couldn't stop grinning. He jumped on Instagram Live that same night and laughed into the camera. "You serious? A charity match? Fine. Let's make it quick then. I'll do it, and after I win, I'll donate double." Thousands joined the live stream, spamming the chat with comments, "He's digging his own grave. You don't know what you've started. This isn't just a fight, it's a lesson coming your way." But he didn't listen. He thought he was in control. He thought it was all hype. He had no idea that in just a few days he'd be standing face to face with the man who taught the world what discipline, respect, and power really mean. Where? Are you watching this story from? Which country or city? Drop it below. Let's see how far Chuck Norris's respect still travels around the world. The sports world couldn't believe what was happening. An 80-year-old martial arts legend had just accepted a challenge, not for fame, not for revenge, but for charity. Chuck Norris's message was short, calm, and powerful. If you want to test yourself, let's do it. One exhibition match. All profits go to veterans and children's hospitals. That single line broke the internet. Thousands of fans flooded Chuck's page with comments of love, support, and awe. The younger generation, who'd only known Chuck from memes, finally began to understand why their parents and grandparents called him a living legend. Meanwhile, the arrogant UFC champion was ecstatic. To him, this wasn't an honor, it was an opportunity. He saw dollar signs, headlines, and global attention. To him, Chuck Norris wasn't a legend, he was a stepping stone. The fighter posted another video standing inside his luxury gym, gloves on, sweat glistening under the lights. "Chuck, I respect your career, but this isn't Hollywood anymore, this is real fighting, and I'm going to end this fantasy once and for all." He threw a few punches toward the camera and laughed. "No hard feelings, Grandpa. Let's make this quick." The arrogance was louder than ever. Every second of that clip went viral. Millions watched, millions shook their heads. Across social media, a quiet war began. Old-school martial artists and fans defended Chuck's legacy. The younger crowd hyped up the UFC champion's confidence. It was more than a fight. It had become a clash between eras, between respect and ego. In the days leading up to the fight, Chuck Norris didn't post a single training video. No sparring clips, no interviews, just silence. But behind that silence was discipline. At dawn, he was already training. Slow stretches, breathing control, perfecting form. He wasn't trying to win a fight. He was preparing to deliver a message. Every kick, every punch was measured, balanced, and precise. For Chuck, this wasn't about proving power. It was about showing that respect never grows old. On the other side of the country, the young fighter was living in a different world. He hired top coaches, trained in fancy gyms, and posted daily updates to keep his followers entertained. Each video more arrogant than the last, just a light warm-up for the old man. Hope Chuck brings his vitamins. I'm going to retire a legend, literally. Even his own fans started to feel uneasy. The comments shifted from hype to concern. Man, you're going too far. Chuck's not someone you mock. You're losing respect before even throwing a punch. But the fighter didn't care. He was blinded by his own spotlight. 2 weeks later, the official press event was announced. Legacy vs. Pride, a charity exhibition fight. The venue sold out in hours. Reporters packed the stage, cameras flashing as both men took their seats. Chuck Norris entered quietly. Black shirt, simple jeans, no entourage. He bowed slightly before sitting down. The room clapped respectfully. Then came the fighter, loud, confident, surrounded by cameras and bodyguards. He pointed at Chuck and laughed. Respect to the legend, but this isn't 1970 anymore. Let's make it fun. Reporters turned to Chuck for a response. He smiled and said softly, "It's always fun when respect is present." That one line, calm and simple, hit harder than any punch. The fighter rolled his eyes, thinking it was all a game, but the crowd knew better. In the following days, the fight's anticipation reached a fever pitch. TV stations replayed their stare-down, clips of Chuck's old fight scenes mixed with the champion's cocky interviews. Every generation had chosen a side, and in between all the noise, Chuck stayed silent. He didn't need to promote the fight. He didn't need to talk. His very presence was enough. The night before the event, the UFC fighter posted one final message. "Tomorrow I end the legend. Grandpa's going down." But across the internet, fans were already writing another story, one they'd soon see play out in front of millions. If you were this young fighter, would you still step into the ring against Chuck Norris? Or back out with your pride? Comment your answer below. The arena lights dimmed. A slow chant rolled through the crowd. A deep, thunderous rhythm that felt like history waking up. Thousands stood in anticipation, phones raised high. The big screen flickered. Legacy vs. Pride, a charity exhibition fight. Every seat was filled, from fight fans to film stars, from retired soldiers to kids who'd only seen Chuck Norris in memes. The announcer's voice boomed through the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight the world witnesses the clash of generations." First out came the UFC champion. He strutted toward the ring. Wearing a golden robe, his team hyping him up. He threw punches into the air, taunting the crowd with a grin. "Make some noise for the future of fighting," the announcer shouted. The crowd erupted. Cheers, whistles, a wave of noise, but mixed in were boos. Long, deep boos from old fans who'd grown up watching real warriors. Then, the lights dimmed again. A hush fell. The screen turned black. A heartbeat sound echoed. Then, a slow fade. Black and white footage of Chuck Norris training decades ago. Breaking boards, sparring with Bruce Lee. Bowing to his opponents, the crowd went silent. Then came the words on screen. "Respect is timeless." A single spotlight hit the entrance, and there he was, Chuck Norris. No robe. No show, just a plain black G, his old belt tied neatly around his waist. He walked slowly, humbly. Each step met with a roar of respect. The crowd wasn't screaming. They were cheering from the heart. People stood up, clapping, some even tearing up. Even the fighter's smirk faded for a moment. He hadn't expected that. Inside the ring, Chuck bowed first, to the crowd, then to his opponent. The champion raised his gloves lazily, nodding without eye contact. The referee explained the rules. Exhibition match. No knockouts intended. Controlled sparring only. But everyone knew. Pride doesn't always follow rules. Round 1 began. The UFC fighter danced around confidently, circling Chuck like a lion stalking prey. He threw quick jabs, testing distance, trying to embarrass him early. Chuck didn't move much. He simply watched. Eyes calm, breathing steady. His stance was old school, hands low, but his balance unshakable. The fighter laughed. "Come on, Grandpa." "Move!" He lunged forward with a fast combo. Left, right. Kick. But each strike missed by inches. Chuck stepped aside with tiny, effortless shifts, his movements precise as clockwork. The crowd gasped. It looked like slow motion, but it was real. He wasn't reacting late. He was reading every move before it happened. The champion got frustrated. He threw a hard leg kick. Chuck checked it with his shin. Perfectly timed. The impact echoed through the ring. The fighter winced. That one hurt. Then, Chuck smiled slightly and said softly, "You rely too much on power." The young man growled, lunging in again. This time Chuck pivoted and one clean, open palm strike to the chest, not hard, not flashy rhyme, but it sent the fighter stumbling back 2 steps. The crowd exploded. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" The fighter's arrogance melted into anger. He rushed again, swinging wildly. But Chuck barely moved, parrying each hit with simple blocks. Old techniques, yet perfect. Round 1 ended. The champion went back to his corner, fuming. His coach whispered, "You're making him look good." "Calm down," he slammed his gloves together. "He's just lucky. Next round I end it." Across the ring, Chuck sat quietly, sipping water, breathing slow. He didn't even look winded. His trainer asked, "You good?" He nodded. "Just a young man learning a lesson." Round 2. The bell rang. The fighter charged in. Throwing a spinning kick, Chuck slipped under it and tapped his leg mid-air, unbalancing him. The crowd laughed, not mockingly, but amazed. Then Chuck spoke calmly. "Control your emotions, or your emotions will control you." The fighter snapped, "Save the quotes for your movies, old man." He rushed again, but this time Chuck sidestepped and gently swept his leg. A clean takedown. The crowd roared. The referee separated them. Even the announcer couldn't contain his excitement. The legend still has it. Cameras flashed, fans screamed, social media lit up in real time. Respect the legend trended within minutes. By now, the young fighter looked tired, not from damage, but from disbelief. He had never faced someone who fought without anger. Chuck wasn't trying to win. He was teaching. Every move carried a lesson. Control, balance, respect. Round 2 ended. The crowd was electric. Chuck bowed again, eyes calm. The champion avoided eye contact. Breathing heavy, the commentators whispered, "This isn't a fight anymore. It's a masterclass." If you were in that crowd watching Chuck Norris move like that, would you cheer, record, or just stand there in shock? Tell me in the comments below. The bell for round 3 rang. The crowd roared, and half excited, half nervous. The young UFC champion had a look in his eyes that everyone recognized. It wasn't focus. It was rage. His pride had taken a hit. He wasn't used to being mocked. And in his mind, that's exactly what Chuck Norris had done. Embarrassed him in front of millions. He slammed his gloves together and stalked toward Chuck, growling, "You want to teach me, old man? Fine, teach me how to get up after this." He swung a furious right hook. The sound cut through the air. Whoosh. But Chuck wasn't there. He had already moved, a light tap to the ribs, a low kick, a quick pivot. Every move from Chuck was clean. Efficient, like water flowing around a rock. The fighter tried again, faster this time. Left jab. Right elbow, spinning back fist. Chuck leaned, ducked, sidestepped, never hitting hard, but never missing either. Each strike was a reminder. The crowd could feel the lesson in motion. It wasn't about strength. It was about control. The fighter's coach shouted from the corner, "Stay calm. Stick to your game plan." But calmness was gone. The champion's ego had taken over. He threw a wild kick and high, reckless. Chuck caught it midair and gently guided it downward. The fighter lost balance, stumbled, and nearly fell. The crowd gasped. Chuck didn't attack. He stepped back and let the man recover. Then he said, softly enough that the mic picked it up, "Respect keeps you balanced." The words hit harder than any punch. The fighter screamed in frustration. He charged again, this time ignoring the rules. He tried to tackle Chuck. The referee shouted, "Stop, stop!" But it was too late. The fighter lunged forward, and when Chuck moved like lightning, a simple turn, a sweep. And suddenly, the UFC champion was on the ground. The audience exploded. Even the commentators were shouting. He took him down. The 80-year-old legend just flipped a world champion like it was nothing. The fighter slammed the mat in anger. He couldn't believe it. It wasn't power. It was pure technique. As the referee separated them again, Chuck bowed, calm as ever. The fighter refused to bow back. He just glared. "You think this is funny?" Chuck shook his head. Gently. "No, I think this is necessary." The arena went silent. You could hear the tension crackle through the air. Round 4 began. The fighter came in, quieter now, trying to think, trying to find an opening. But fear had replaced arrogance. Chuck was still moving the same. Steady, rhythmic, completely composed. The champion feinted a jab. Chuck didn't even flinch. He simply said, "When you fight with ego, you fight blind." That line hit the audience like a thunderclap. Everyone could feel the truth in it. The fighter swung hard, trying to prove him wrong, but Chuck blocked it effortlessly. One hand, then tapped the fighter on the shoulder, smiled, and said, "You're strong." But strength without respect is weakness. The crowd lost it. Fans stood up, shouting Chuck's name. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" Even the commentators were speechless. This isn't a fight anymore, and it's a life lesson being broadcast live. By now the fighter was breathing heavy. His movements were slower, sloppier. Every missed punch drained more energy. Meanwhile, Chuck looked untouched, calm, breathing evenly. The years of martial arts discipline were showing. The young fighter muttered between breaths, "You're not even trying." Chuck smiled softly. Exactly. The final seconds of the round ticked away. Chuck performed a perfect defensive sequence, blocking, sidestepping, redirecting. Then, just before the bell, he tapped the fighter's chest lightly, a symbolic strike. The crowd exploded again. It wasn't a knockout, but it felt like one. The bell rang. The champion stumbled to his corner, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with disbelief. He looked across the ring at Chuck, who stood, calm, hands folded, bowing slightly. The respect he'd refused to give was now being earned. Silently. Between rounds, the stadium lights dimmed again for a short break. Clips of the fight replayed on the big screens. Chuck's flawless timing, the takedown, the calm expressions. Social media was going insane. Respect the legend, discipline over ego. Chuck still got it everywhere you looked. People were sharing the same thought. Age doesn't defeat greatness. Ego does. When the lights came back on, something had changed in the fighter's eyes. The anger was gone. For the first time all night, he looked humble. He looked across the ring and said quietly, "You're the real deal, sir." Chuck nodded. "Now you understand." The crowd clapped softly. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about honor. If you were that UFC fighter, would you apologize right there in the ring or wait till the end of the fight? Type your answer below and let's see who's got real humility. The air inside the arena had changed. What began as a flashy spectacle now felt like something deeper, sacred. Almost every camera lens was focused on one thing. The 80-year-old legend standing tall, calm, and centered, and across from him, the UFC champion, exhausted, humbled, yet still trying to stand proud. The bell rang for round 5, the final round. For a moment, neither man moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then Chuck took a single step forward. The young fighter lifted his gloves, ready but wary. Chuck's movements were slower now, deliberate. He wasn't attacking, he was teaching, one motion at a time. He'd feint a strike, not to hit, but to measure. He'd block, not to defend, but to show balance. Every second of that round was like a silent lesson in discipline. The fighter threw a punch, and Chuck caught it midair, not forcefully, but gently. He held it there for a split second, then let go. He whispered, "You see? Control, not anger." The fighter stepped back, confused, breathing heavy. For the first time all night, his eyes softened. He wasn't fighting an opponent anymore. He was facing wisdom. The crowd had gone quiet, watching with reverence. This wasn't a brawl, it was a dialogue of respect. The fighter circled again, faint smile breaking through. He tried a few more moves, carefully this time. Each one met with a calm counter. Each one answered with grace. The audience started clapping in rhythm. Clap, clap, clap. They weren't cheering violence, and they were honoring discipline. Even the commentators grew emotional. "You can feel it," one said softly. "This isn't about power anymore. It's about legacy." Midway through the round, the fighter dropped his guard slightly. He was breathing hard, drenched in sweat. He stepped forward, looked Chuck in the eye, and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disrespect you." Chuck's expression didn't change. He bowed his head slightly and replied, "Apology accepted, but don't say it for me. Say it for yourself." That line hit the crowd like thunder. The fighter froze. Then, slowly he bowed, deeply this time. And just like that, the crowd stood up. They weren't just clapping. They were saluting. The referee signaled the final minute. The two men touched gloves, not as rivals, But as warriors, the last 60 seconds were pure art, light exchanges, controlled movements, mutual respect. Every motion told a story. The story of ego, humility, and redemption. When the final bell rang, there was no winner, no loser, just silence and then an explosion of cheers. Chuck took a step back, bowed again to the crowd, and raised the fighter's hand high. The arena shook with applause. The interviewer entered the ring, mic in hand, voice trembling. "Chuck, after all these years, you're still teaching us lessons. What do you want people to take from this moment?" Chuck smiled humbly, eyes glistening under the lights. "In every fight, there's someone trying to prove they're better. But the truth is, the greatest victory is over your own pride. If you can defeat that, no one can beat you." The audience erupted. Even the young fighter wiped a tear from his eye. He took the mic next, voice cracking slightly. "I came here to prove I was the best, but tonight, I learned something more important. Greatness isn't in power. It's in respect. Thank you, Mr. Norris." The crowd began chanting again, louder than before. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" As they left the ring, the cameras followed Chuck down the tunnel. No celebration. No victory pose. Just the quiet walk of a man who'd once again reminded the world what true strength looks like. Behind him, the young fighter stopped. At the ring steps, he turned back to the audience and bowed deeply, a gesture he'd never done before. The place went wild. They weren't cheering the fight anymore. They were cheering change. That night, clips flooded the internet. Millions watched as the cocky UFC champion bowed before an 80-year-old martial arts icon. But instead of mockery, the comments were filled with respect. He came in with ego and left with honor. Chuck didn't defeat him. He awakened him. This is what real fighting spirit looks like. By morning, the video had over 100 million views. Every platform carried the same message. Respect never retires. Later, during a post-event interview, reporters asked Chuck if he planned to fight again. He chuckled and said, "No, I've fought enough battles. The next generation needs to fight theirs. With discipline, not arrogance." Then he smiled at the camera and added, "And maybe, just maybe, learn to bow before they swing." If you were that UFC fighter, and you just got humbled by a living legend, what's the first thing you'd say to him? Drop your answer below and let's see who's got true respect. The morning after the fight, the internet looked like it had stopped spinning. Every major news outlet, sports channel, and social media feed showed the same moment, the arrogant UFC champion bowing before Chuck Norris. That single image became history. It wasn't just about martial arts anymore. It was about humility, legacy, and honor. The clip replayed across every screen, Chuck's calm defense, the takedown, the quiet wisdom, no violence, no knockout, just pure respect. Even people who didn't know who Chuck Norris was, younger fans, casual viewers, were suddenly searching his name. Google Trends skyrocketed. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips from Walker, Texas Ranger, and his early tournaments went viral again. But more than nostalgia, people were talking about his message. The greatest victory is over, your own pride. Those words echoed everywhere. From gym walls to motivational pages, from podcasts to sports talk shows. Meanwhile, the UFC champion had disappeared for a few days. No posts, no interviews, just silence. Fans speculated, had he quit? Was he embarrassed? But then 3 days later, he posted a video. No background music, no sponsor logos, just him sitting quietly in a gym. He looked straight into the camera and said, "3 days ago I thought I was untouchable. Thought fame and skill made me better than others. Then an 80-year-old man taught me more in 15 minutes than I learned in my entire career. He, eyes heavy but sincere. I disrespected a legend, but instead of humiliating me, he humbled me. So from now on, I'll fight the way Chuck Norris fought, with honor." That video went viral instantly. Millions commented, not to mock, but to respect. That's how a real man admits his mistakes. Ego lost. Humanity won. Chuck changed him, and all of us watching. A week later, the two men met again, this time off camera, at a charity event for veterans. They shook hands, smiled, and posed together. No rivalry, just brotherhood. Chuck said to him quietly, Every fighter gets humbled at least once. What matters is how you stand after the fall. The young man nodded. I'll remember that for the rest of my life. That moment marked the start of something new. The UFC fighter began promoting Respect Week, a campaign encouraging athletes to honor their coaches, opponents, and fans. He started donating part of his fight earnings to martial arts programs for underprivileged kids. And at every event, he told the same story. It all began with one lesson from Chuck Norris. For Chuck, life returned to its quiet rhythm. He refused interviews, ignored fame, and went back to his training, teaching small groups of students. When reporters finally caught up to him months later, he said, "I don't need credit. The lesson reached who it needed to reach. And if one more person learns respect because of it, that's victory enough." By the end of that year, the moment had become legendary, replayed in documentaries, discussed in podcasts, even taught in martial arts schools. A quote appeared on posters, shirts, and murals around the world: "Strength fades. Respect doesn't." Chuck Norris, that phrase became timeless. The UFC fighter eventually returned to the ring. Calmer, smarter, stronger. He no longer taunted opponents. He bowed before and after every fight. Fans noticed. So did his rivals. One interviewer asked him before a big title match, "You think you'll win tonight?" He smiled and said, "Winning isn't the point. Fighting with honor is." And the crowd cheered, not just for him, but for the man he became. The world had watched a transformation. From arrogance to respect, from pride to peace, all sparked by one calm, disciplined, 80-year-old martial artist who proved that legends don't fade. They guide. If you believe respect is stronger than pride, type honor in the comments. And remember, greatness isn't about how hard you hit, it's about how deeply you inspire.